The Archdiocese of Chicago is a vibrant and diverse faith community. We celebrate our faith through worship, evangelization, and reaching out to the needy. Welcome to Catholic Chicago.
Welcome, everybody, and thank you for tuning into our show today. My name is Bob Gilligan, and I'm the director of the Catholic Conference of Illinois. And we represent the bishops at Springfield, at the state capitol, and trying to advance the agenda of the church and get involved in various public policy issues. We do that through communicating with you, trying to get the word out to educate people about some of the issues that we're involved with, and that's the nature of our program today. So today, let me just run over the lineup on what we're going to be talking about. We're fortunate enough to be joined this morning by one of our guests who participated in a press conference that the coalition called Stop Assisted Suicide Illinois held in Springfield about a month ago. Dr. Kevin Gardner is here to talk with us about assisted suicide and that issue and why the church has expressed concern about it and why we're articulating our position against passing that bill to lawmakers in Springfield. After that, we're going to do that for probably about the first half hour of the program. And then we're going to make a segue to another aspect of our agenda in Springfield, something we're very concerned about, which is how do we care for those who are incarcerated? What's our moral obligation to care for those in prison and in jail? And what can we do when people are being released, when they've paid their debt to society, and it's time to help them move on in their lives and become the person that God intended them to be. So we're going to be joined, we're fortunate to have with us in studio, Mark McCombs. He is the relatively new director of Colby House, which is one of the Archdiocese programs that's located right where the jail is located out on 26th in California in Chicago. And then finally, we're going to do a little bit of a plug for an event coming up, a plug being a promotion, I guess. Jeanette Malafa from our staff, from the Catholic Conference staff, is going to join us at the end and talk a little bit about the March for Life that's coming up in Springfield, and I think that's this week, if I recall. It's unbelievable how time is just marching on. So that's our program for today. Those are the issues that we'll cover in the next hour. And so without further ado, let's go to our first guest, who is with us from, we are in the northern part of the state here in Chicago, and Dr. Kevin Gardner is joining us from the far southern part of the state, if I recall correctly. Dr. Gardner, thanks for joining us.
Good morning. Great to be here, Bob. Thank you.
So Dr. Gardner participated in a press conference that we had. There's a coalition that's been formed. It's called Stop Assisted Suicide Illinois, and it's comprised of a number of different groups and individuals who are concerned about legislation that's been introduced in Springfield to enact what they call assisted suicide. The coalition, Stop Assisted Suicide, is comprised of religious organizations like the Catholic Conference, Agudath Israel. Orthodox Jews are also very concerned about this legislation, as are some members of the evangelical community. In addition, we have a very strong support from a number of groups in the disabled community. And finally, we have many doctors and nurses and professionals who have joined the coalition to express their concern about what would happen if this legislation were introduced. So the bill number is Senate Bill 3499. It's been introduced by Senator Linda Holmes. She's a Democrat from the Plainfield area. The legislation was introduced probably about 2 months ago. And to date, luckily, it has not been heard in the General Assembly. Where we are right now in the legislative calendar is it is April 15th, the day this program is airing. And the legislative session should have about 40 days or so to go before we adjourn in May. So the bill could be heard at any time. It's currently in a subcommittee, which is probably a good sign. But in Springfield, anything can change rapidly. So what we're hoping to do today, and we're hoping to do through the next couple months, is to increase our education about this issue. People are probably familiar with Dr. Jack Kevorkian and this whole movement that started years ago with trying to end the lives of people who are generally sick or have received a terminal diagnosis and have no more of that, at least in Illinois, the way the bill reads, is they have no more than 6 months to live. So the life expectancy is 6 months. A doctor or 2 doctors, according to the bill in Illinois, determines that somebody is capable of making this decision. And if 2 doctors agree, the individual can be afforded the opportunity to be prescribed lethal drugs necessary to end their life. The way that the bill works in Illinois is that those drugs are sent to a pharmacy or to the individual's home, and that's where it ends. The person, it's up to them to take it. It's up to them. Maybe they decide not to take the drugs. There's no doctor involved once the decision has been approved to allow that person to be prescribed the drugs. That's the way the bill works. It's very similar to what other states have done. There are some protections. I know many people watching this are concerned about healthcare right of conscience, and the authors of the bill did try to take that into consideration, and the bill does clearly say that if a doctor or a hospital does not want to do it, they're not being coerced by the state to do it. So there's some things in the bill that are not as burdensome as other states have experienced. So that's really the bill per se. Now let's kind of switch to Dr. Gardner and our conversation with you. Maybe we should just open it up by, Dr. Gardner, you have something to say on this topic. I mean, you're an expert. You have been trained in palliative care. So you have some training in this area, correct?
That is correct. I'm board certified in hospice and palliative medicine, and also in internal medicine, also in addiction medicine. So I see people who are chronically ill, people who are mentally ill and addicted, and then I treat patients at the end of life as well.
There are a lot of arguments against this bill that I've talked about. I mean, there's an insurance component here that people feel that insurance companies won't provide treatments for people at the end of life, and they'll offer the lethal drugs necessary to end their lives to save money. There's an argument to be made that often doctors' diagnoses are incorrect and people long outlive the time that they're told. But I think one of the more powerful arguments out there comes from Dr. Gardner and people, doctors, nurses who have stepped up and expressed a concern about this. The American Medical Association has established that they are against this legislation. And recently, the Illinois State Medical Society has said that they oppose it. Dr. Gardner, tell us why you're concerned about this. What in the legislation do you see that would cause you to participate in the press conference that we had back in Springfield back in March?
There are several points. I'd like to also add that the American College of Physicians, of which I'm a member, that's the National Association for Internists, is also strongly against assisted suicide. As far as what's in this bill, it's concerning one, there's no mandate for a psychiatric evaluation. Most people who end their lives do so because they're depressed, they're afraid, they have anxiety, and they can't cope. And those are all treatable issues.
One of the things that we're talking about as well is what experienced in Oregon was that when people would ask for the lethal drugs necessary to end their lives, the state of Oregon would ask, well, why do you want to do this? And it was interesting that most people wanting to end their life feel when they're faced with a terminal diagnosis that, number one, they want to end their life because they feel that they're a burden to their family and friends. They feel they can no longer participate in the activities of their daily life that they've been enjoying over the past couple of years, for their whole life. But interestingly, pain and suffering is the fifth most frequent response. It's not among the top, it's the fifth. So, Dr. Gardner, I know you're a palliative care doc. Tell us about palliative care and the answers that it provides on this difficult public policy question.
Well, for palliative care, one, we can address pain, anxiety, and depression very effectively. Two, people experience that existential angst about the new normal that they are now in, and palliative care also addresses that. We have counselors, we have social workers, we have pastoral care to help with that spiritual angst. And as anybody who's become disabled, who has had to deal with a chronic illness can tell you, once you get past that initial angst, that initial depression, you find a new normal and you function and your life goes on. It's similar to any major life change, losing a spouse, losing a parent, losing anyone close to you. It seems like everything is coming to an end. Life will never be the same. But we adjust, we find a new normal, and we move on. That's our human nature. That's our God-given ability to find meaning and move forward.
Yeah, it's concerning that it seems like the advocates are very focused on that situation of them not wanting to experience pain. And I guess we've asked this question to many people. So in the year 2024, with modern medicine being what it is and technology being what it is it necessary that somebody has to suffer pain at the end of their life?
Well, everybody's going to experience some pain. We can't take away all pain, but once that pain presents itself, we can control it very quickly, very effectively, and keep it from becoming excruciating or totally incapacitating. Now, at the end of life, the medicines we give to relieve pain, to relieve anxiety, may themselves make somebody bedbound, but they can still function, they can still eat, they can still interact with family, up to the point where their body starts to shut down and their brains are no longer functioning. But there's no need for anybody to suffer tremendous pain for more than a few hours. And of course, it's going to take much longer than that for assisted suicide to take place. Palliative care can control that pain very effectively within the first few hours that it presents itself.
I know, one of the things that the American Medical Association has been fairly strong on this issue. They've been consistent throughout the last couple years of every year. I don't know how often they meet or renew this, but over the past couple of years, I know they've maintained their position in opposition to legalizing assisted suicide. And they have a very good statement out there on that. And we actually lifted some of that actual verbiage in a statement that the Catholic Conference of Illinois is putting out soon. It's called A Better Way Forward. And one of the things we talk about in that statement is we reference the AMA statement and reasons why they're opposed to it. And we recommend to the state of Illinois that the better path forward is, as Dr. Gardner mentioned, it's to invest and expand resources in palliative care, and also to provide more social services and more assistance to families and agencies to help treat depression, as Dr. Gardner is mentioning, which is so prevalent as people are faced with a very serious diagnosis that in this case is terminal. Dr. Gardner, the AMA, it seems like they've been pretty consistent about this, but we received some fairly good news recently from the State Medical Society in Illinois. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yes, the State Medical Society last year became neutral. They voted to be neutral on the position of assisted suicide. In other words, they left it up to lawmakers to do what they will without their recommendation or guidance. However, this past weekend at the annual meeting, the membership overrode that decision by the board, and the State Medical Society now resumed their position against the assisted suicide in any form, especially Senate Bill 3499. By means of the grassroots rising up, doctors like me who practice medicine and see patients and saying, no, this is not right, we don't want this. So it was voted down fairly soundly, actually.
We're going to take a quick break here. We're talking about Senate Bill 3499. It's legislation that would enact assisted suicide in Illinois, and we're going over some of the reasons why that should be opposed with Dr. Kevin Gardner, who amongst other things, practices palliative care in Illinois. This is Bob Gilligan of the Catholic Conference. Don't go away. We'll be right back.
year 44 for me teaching. When I started here, there were teachers here that had taught me when I was a student. Now I'm the old person. Right now, I teach junior high math. I love when kids find what I'm teaching to be fun and they get it. I see that light bulb go off and it's a thrill. People are always amazed. What? You're here for 44 years? It's hard for me to believe, frankly. I love what I do. Every summer I think, oh, I miss the classroom. Even on the weekends, I think I can't wait to get back on Monday and teach those quadratic equations.
Shape the next generation of leaders. Teach. Apply today at archchicago.org/schooljobs.
Catholic Charities' Family Self-Sufficiency Program has assisted thousands of single parents who are working to become more self-sufficient through education and employment opportunities. Our experienced case managers accompany participants for up to 5 years on their journey to identify, address, and break down barriers to improving their quality of life and achieving meaningful goals for themselves and for their families. Professional, compassionate assistance is offered in a safe and trusting environment as participants develop the skills needed to become financially stable and able to support themselves. Every achievement starts with a decision to try. To learn more about Catholic Charities' Family Self-Sufficiency Program, call 847-782-4233 or visit CatholicCharities.net. Welcome back, everybody. This is Bob Gilligan of the Catholic Conference, and thank you for watching or listening to the program here today on April 15th. We're talking about reasons why to oppose Senate Bill 3499 with Dr. Kevin Gardner, who has participated in the press conference that the coalition Stop Assisted Suicide held in the state capitol about a month ago. Dr. Gardner, one of the things you mentioned earlier was about individuals who have received the bad news that they have a terminal diagnosis. And you said that oftentimes, people can experience some kind of depression associated with that. One of the things that this bill does is it does require an attending doctor and a consulting doctor, two doctors, to condone the prescription, the approval of the prescription of the drugs in order necessary to kill yourself. So in that diagnosis, it's up to the doctor to decide whether a person is capable. Do you think that doctors that people would go to have the ability to really know if somebody's depressed or not? It seems to me like, I think you could say that, well, wouldn't you automatically want to refer just to make sure the person's not depressed or something's going on there? Or is a doctor, in your opinion, of a medical doctor, I guess this would be, have the training and skills to detect whether somebody's depressed or not? I guess that's my question.
Well, yes, a medical doctor should have that training and skill. However, with the time constraints in an evaluation, in a busy office, depression's missed often. It's not something on the top of most patients' list when they come in. And when somebody presents saying, I have this horrible illness, I think I'm going to die, they speak to you without any sign of irrationality. Just like I'm speaking to you now, and they say, I want to die, that doctor is not going to suspect depression unless they delve deeper, ask, spend an hour or so getting to know the patient. And many times, these doctors who are approving assisted suicide for a patient don't know the patient. It may be their first time or second time ever interacting with the patient. And if you don't know somebody, you're not going to know what their normal is. You're not going to know whether they're depressed or anxious, if they're good at concealing those symptoms.
And that's a very good point. Go ahead. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Go ahead.
I was going to say, even in states where the psychiatric evaluation is available, like Oregon, only 1% of patients in Oregon actually get evaluated. It's not actually mandated, it's recommended and it's available, but an expert evaluation is only done by a psychiatrist in 1% of patients who receive assisted suicide in Oregon, which is horrible.
And I think that kind of brings me up to my second point, really related to that, which is that I think what you'll see, and I think you see this in other states, is that there's a bit of doctor shopping that goes on. The patient needs to just find one or two doctors to approve it. And I think if you look long enough and hard enough, you can find one or two doctors. If somebody, for example, if a doctor turned you down, denied it, you can probably find another doctor that'd be willing to do it, and another doctor who would in turn do it. My sense is in Oregon, I think I recall reading, is that there's very few doctors, in terms of the percentage of all doctors out there, that are comfortable in doing this type of, I don't want to say practicing medicine, but this type of arrangement.
That is correct. Yes. Yes, it's a small minority who actually participate. And people shop around to find those people, those physicians, and they go to them, even from out of state. Some of these states with assisted suicide allow people to come from out of state and see a doctor once and get their prescription.
Right. And the other question I was going to ask in terms of the medical aspect of this is that there does seem to be some, there's stories out there of people who ingest the drugs who have difficult reactions to them. I think what the proponents seem to do is they seem to portray this as a very peaceful death. And I'm sure that in many cases it does go, if you will, there's no adverse reaction. But we've heard stories about some significant physical reaction to the drugs that did result in quite pain, vomiting, and quite frankly, I think in some cases it didn't work. So I don't know if you have any comment about that, but I've read stories like that. I'm not suggesting that there's a lot of them, but I do think I'm fairly confident there's enough information out there that it does happen.
Absolutely, it does. In a minority of cases, people don't die quickly within minutes of peaceful death, close their eyes, go to sleep, and wake up in a better place. Or if they're not believers, whatever they think happens after death. But in a minority of cases, people thrash about, they gurgle, they gasp, they moan, and sometimes they don't die. They continue to suffer for hours. And they might die of choking on their own secretions, on their own saliva, or from a heart attack from the stress on their bodies, rather than a peaceful death due to the ingestion of the drugs.
And I tell you, the evidence that I have, the anecdotal evidence I have for bringing that up this morning, is that in the state of California right now, there's legislation been introduced that would allow for the drugs not to be, there would be an option, I believe. Right now, the legislation in Illinois, too, requires that the drugs be ingested. They be taken orally. And I know that there's a movement afoot to allow for intravenous utilization of the drugs because of this very reason that they're saying. And then there's other reasons as well, is that some people are disabled, can't physically apparently ingest these sort of things, and they need assistance. And I think there's other reasons. So you do see a movement towards intravenous use of the drug in order to end your life. So yeah, that probably is true.
Yeah, that's correct. And that brings up the point, too, that there are no guidelines on how to do this. No medical society has issued guidelines on how to properly kill someone. The FDA has not approved any medications to end life. All medications approved by the FDA are actually to help extend life, to ease pain and suffering. But the FDA has never approved any medication for ending one's life. So all of these drugs essentially are experimental, and everyone who receives them is receiving them from somebody who's basically shooting from the hip and saying, oh, this should do the job. Take this and you'll probably die, and you'll probably die quickly and quietly. But he doesn't know, or she doesn't know. The prescriber is basically guessing.
And it kind of gives us full circle back to my original point, which is that when the way the law works in Illinois and many other states is once the approval has taken place, the drugs are sent to the individual's home or a pharmacy, and then there's no oversight in terms of the actual taking of those. And it leads one to wonder, what if the individual changes his or her mind and decides not to do this? Yet there's family members that have, for whatever reason, an incentive to want that person to pass away. Is there coercion that could be here? We have no way of knowing that. There's no validation, there's no oversight of that. And then secondly, if the individual does not take the drugs, and this is a problem, I suppose you being a doctor could talk about this more thoroughly, then you have these drugs that are lethal laying around an individual's home or apartment, which we don't want that either. So there's a lot of, I think this is one of those issues where the more individuals understand, the more things that can be brought up, such as that you're bringing up, Dr. Gardner, I think it increases the discomfort with legalizing it. And that's what we're trying to do here, is just to educate people about some of the things that I know the proponents can come up with effective emotional arguments on why this should be approved. And our hearts go out to people with a terminal diagnosis, of course. But as I said earlier, the Catholic bishops and many others, and you included, Dr. Gardner, as a palliative care doctor, are going to say, you know what, there's a better way forward at the end of life. There is a better way. This is not the good way to go for a lot of reasons. There's a slippery slope argument here. There's unintended consequences of doing this. And finally, we should bring up that there's a suicide contagion. It has factually been proven now through social science research that states that have approved this, not only does the suicide rate go up for everyone because they have people engaged with assisted suicide, but what they call non-assisted suicide. Those people who ordinarily would not have ended their lives now see the state has sanctioned it. They've given it approval. They've given it a green light. And so whenever the state says something's okay, you're going to get more of it. So the suicide contagion is real.
That is true. That is true. And exposure to suicide is a well-known risk factor for committing suicide, especially among teens and young adults. So if we medicalize and legalize this, there's going to be more assisted suicide. We will see an epidemic of non-assisted suicide as well. And that's well established. That's definitely well established. If you see somebody else do it, they're comfortable. People are making a big deal, mourning, saying how great they were. A teen who's depressed is going to want that. They're going to be much more likely to do themselves in than if they had not been exposed to that. So again, if we medicalize something, legalize something, it's going to become normalized. People will think, oh, this is okay.
Dr. Gardner, thanks so much for joining us here. I want to just wrap up this segment by pointing people to two sources of information. One of them is the coalition website, the coalition that had the press conference that Dr. Gardner participated in. And that website is www.stopassistedsuicideillinois.org. There's a lot of really good information on it. And also, please feel free to go to our website, www.ilcatholic.org, and in that, on that, there's a landing page. It's called A Better Way Forward. It's up on your screen now. You'll see how you can participate in the advocacy actions necessary to stop this legislation. The bishop's letter is up there. It has not been sent to parishes yet. It will be, but it's up there already. It's called A Better Way Forward. It's a message from the Catholic bishops of Illinois. We have a section on there, frequently asked questions. So you can help educate yourself a little bit more about how to respond to some of the things you might be hearing. And of course, there's some really nice materials for prayers, novenas, to help stop assisted suicide that we hope all the Catholic parishes in the state use over the next couple months as we see this legislation will, I'm sure at some point in time, be the subject of a hearing and legislative debate. Dr. Gardner, thank you so much for joining us this morning, and thank you for all you're doing, and let's keep up the good work.
Thank you, Bob. Good to talk to you again.
Great. Good talking to you, and I'm sure we'll be talking soon. This is Bob Gilligan. Don't go away. We're going to switch gears here a little bit. We're going to now bring in studio Mark McCombs, who is the director of the Colby House here in Chicago, and talk a little bit about the church's obligations to serve those who are incarcerated and to help them once they're released from prison. Don't go away. We're right back.
The cemetery ministry is a core ministry of our Catholic faith tied to the corporal works of mercy. It's comforting to know that our Catholic cemeteries are caring for the remains of our loved ones awaiting the resurrection. There are 44 Archdiocese of Chicago Catholic cemeteries willing to help you in your time of loss. Call 708-449-6100 or visit CatholicCemeteriesChicago.org. Catholic Cemeteries, serving the Catholic community since 1837.
At Catholic Charities, we want to remind you that we are here for anyone who is a victim of domestic violence or anyone who has a concern about someone they think may be a victim. Domestic violence affects millions of people each year, both women and men, of every race, religion, culture, and economic status. It includes physical, psychological, and emotional abuse, inflicted in both subtle and overt ways. The impact on children can be devastating. If you or someone you know are victims of domestic violence and you are looking for a place for healing and recovery, call us at 773-935-3434 in Cook County and 224-430-4977 in Lake County. A safer, happier tomorrow can begin today.
I am a seminarian.
The Church needs compassionate and well-trained priests to help guide each of us through life.
What inspires me, what draws me always to the priesthood is continue to see priests be a beacon of hope for other people.
You can play a part in the education of these young men as they prepare for a life of service to others.
I want to be that beacon of hope too, and it sets my heart on fire.
To support our seminarians, make your gift at archchicago.org/seminarian fund or call 312-534-7959.
This is year 44 for me teaching. When I started here, there were teachers here that had taught me when I was a student. Now I'm the old person. Right now, I teach junior high math. I love when kids find what I'm teaching to be fun and they get it. I see that light bulb go off and it's a thrill. People are always amazed. What? You're here for 44 years? It's hard for me to believe, frankly. I love what I do. Every summer I think, oh, I miss the classroom. Even on the weekends, I think I can't wait to get back on Monday and teach those quadratic equations.
Shape the next generation of leaders. Teach. Apply today at archchicago.org/schooljobs.
You're listening to Catholic Chicago. Ahead, the Archdiocese of Chicago brings you programs about the people, events, and issues that touch our lives. Thanks for letting us be part of your morning. Now again, Catholic Chicago.
Thanks for coming back and joining our next segment here. This is Bob Gilligan of the Catholic Conference of Illinois, and we're really lucky this morning to have with us Mark McCombs. Mark seems like he's new, but he's not new. He has been the director of the Kolbe House for a couple months now, and what we want to do today is talk a little bit about the work of the Kolbe House, what it does to further the mission of the church, and also maybe some public policy topics that Mark's been involved with. Mark, thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me, Bob.
Now I just remembered I'm supposed to look at you and not this silly this camera.
I'm looking at myself in the monitor.
I've been having to do that.
This is like a Zoom call where you sit there, you spend more time looking at yourself and worrying about your hair than you do about what's going on around you.
I've been doing that for the past half hour, so I'm really glad to look at you. That's how bad it is.
When you're ready to look at me, then you know it's bad.
Good. Mark, thanks for taking some time this morning. This was really great. Let's talk a little about just Kolbe House, because everybody assumes Kolbe House, what it is, who it is named after. Let's start there.
It is named after Saint Maximilian Kolbe, who was, of course, the very venerated priest in Germany, I believe, Germany and Austria, during World War II. Worked diligently to assist Jews and others to get out of Germany. Wound up being held in a concentration camp At one point, somebody escaped from the concentration camp, and the commandant decided to make an example and condemned 10 of the prisoners to death by starvation, no less. One of the men, I believe it was a Polish man, started crying out, didn't want to leave his family, and Father Max decided to volunteer to take his place. Was held in isolation in an underground bunker. After 2 weeks, the commandant wanted the bunker cleared out. Father Max was still there, was one of the last ones still alive, and the guards came and executed him by injecting him with carbolic acid, no less. And the word was that he just meekly put out his arm and submitted.
Courage.
So
yeah.
he's courage, absolutely. So he's the patron saint of prisoners all over the world.
Yeah. One of the frustrations about this job that I have, and I'm sure you feel some way, is like, the church does so much for so many people, and it just kind of does it because that's what we're called to do. And I think Colby House is a great example of that. Every Catholic in the Archdiocese should be aware of Colby House and what it does, and just to know that this is tough work. I mean, tell us a little about, what you're doing is you're serving people who are incarcerated, and you're reminding them that, no, they too have dignity. They are people of God, just like us. They made a mistake, they did something wrong, but they have just as much dignity as you and I do. And it's just a wonderful ministry of the church.
It's a fantastic ministry of the church, and I always tell our people that are volunteer, we are the prison and jail ministry for the Archdiocese. And so we minister to both people in the jail. We also minister to people coming out of jail through our reentry program and to their families. And we have a number of different programs with now close to 70 or 80 volunteers that we could not do this without them. And God bless them. These are people who, I'm sure are hearing from their friends and neighbors, why are you doing this with these criminals? They're criminals.
Yeah.
And they put their hearts out there and their souls, and they're putting their hearts and souls out there not because it's easy, because it's right, and oftentimes to get beat up because a lot of times they're not going to quote unquote succeed. They're not going to fix this person. But I always say, they're like, well, this didn't happen, that didn't happen, the other didn't happen. I said, did it change you? Did it give you a better perspective on, second chance, and that nobody should ever be judged by their worst moment? And did you talk to someone else about it? And they go, yeah. I said, then we succeeded. Then you succeeded.
Yeah.
The idea is not just to change that person behind bars or coming out of bars. It's to change our parishes, to change our congregants and the way they think about people on the margins.
And the other thing about that example you just gave, that real world lived experience will never leave that person.
That's right. That's absolutely right. You're broken. You're changed forever. You do this, you're absolutely changed forever.
You've mentioned too, it's not only the people who are incarcerated in jail, but it's also, I think sometimes we forget that, and I think we're all kind of guilty of this. We think, okay, people have served their time, they get out and they just move on with their lives.
Yeah, they don't.
It's not easy.
No.
Tell us about the challenges.
Well, I always say this in a lot of ways, and you know this, and I'll disclose this. I did 3 years in prison. I was an attorney, and I charged a client for services I didn't perform. I did 3 years. Most of it in the Taylorville Correctional Center in the state system. In a lot of ways, and I know this is going to sound absolutely kooky, prison is easier than reentry. Because prison, you wake up every day, they tell you what to do, where to go, when to eat, what you're going to wear. It's always blue. Your life is completely programmed for you. You get out, you have none of that structure. You have to find a job, find housing, find transportation, because you probably don't have a car and don't have a whole lot of money to spend on buses. You may, although it's getting better, have to find a state ID. Nobody can do anything without a state ID. You're going to have to sign up for health insurance. You may have some child support or family obligations. You may have elderly parents that you're taking care of, on and on. And you have to do it all with a criminal conviction, which makes it difficult every single time. So that's the challenge, I think, for us, as much as accompanying people while they're in prison, is to accompany them on the outside to make sure that they make that transition, because if current statistics hold up, 4 out of 10 will go back within 3 years.
I'm glad you brought that up, because that, I hope, shed some light on why recidivism occurs. It's not always easy. I mean, and sometimes that person with the best of intentions and with the best motivation, it's an uphill, it can be a real uphill struggle, and everybody's situation is different.
Yeah.
Some people can make that transition, and they do so successfully, but they probably have a social safety net around them that when they have their dark moment, and it can happen.
There's somebody there to grab them.
There's somebody there to grab them, and unfortunately, many of those that were being released probably are going back into something similar or exactly where they were when they got out.
Unemployment for people returning from prison now is 5 times higher than the national rate. It's higher than the unemployment rate was for all the United States during the Great Depression. If we can get people into programming within the first 72 hours, that's the crucial period, because after 72 hours, to start with what we call freedom amnesia. The air smells good.
Yeah,
this is nice. The beer tastes great. And everything is wonderful, and I'll do that next week. But if we get within the first 72 hours, we'll cut the recidivism rate in half. If we can get people into meaningful full-time employment, we'll cut it down to single digits. That's really the objective here. People start getting invested in themselves, and once they get invested in themselves, there's more risk, there's more cost to going back. And there's more reason for them to stay.
Tell us about some of the things that you're working on that helps address some of those challenges you just outlined.
Well, our ministry is really broken up into 3 parts. The first part is our in-jail ministry. We are one of the 2 longest-term providers of programming in Cook County Jail. We've recently expanded to the Federal Metropolitan Correctional Center, and we're in talks with the Illinois Youth Center in Chicago. We have about 70 volunteers that are in the jail providing programming 30 hours a week, both religious and non-religious programming, anywhere from centering prayer. We do Enneagram Prison Project. We do Bible studies. I have a wonderful 87-year-old nun from the Daughters of Charity who has been there for 15 years doing painting from the heart in the women's division. We run 20 masses a month in the jail, and that's, for amongst other reasons, it's to build up our foundation so that we can say to people, when you get out, our motto is, make Colby House your first stop. We are 2 blocks, our office is 2 blocks north of the jail. People get out, the motivation to come to see us is you're going to get a fresh set of clean, brand new clothes. You're going to get new jeans, t-shirts, underwear, toiletries. And in return for that, you're going to let us do an assessment on you. And we're going to figure out, what do you need? Do you need housing counseling? Okay, we're going to refer you to this person. Do you get out of prison, you may have had behavioral health issues that you were being treated with medication. You didn't get that medication going out. We're going to get you over to the hospital to get that medication done. So I always say, we're the welcoming center. We're the place that connects the dots. We don't do the heavy lifting. We send you off to the place that does the heavy lifting.
On your screen, you can probably see some of the material from Colby House.
That's our Palm Sunday walk that we just did around the jail.
A little bit of the material on what it is, some of the shots, like you said, about Palm Sunday, that kind of thing. It's really a wonderful ministry that the church provides. So I know, like, you also, in the past, you had worked for Safer Foundation and a similar work, really kind of focusing on what do people need to do to get their lives straight away once they get out. Do you think the situation market, is it getting better? Are we making progress at all, or are the challenges?
I think the challenges. I think the challenges have become more so in the past few years, for a couple of different reasons. I know you know that we worked very hard on legislation to try and create a statewide agency to coordinate all of the different returning resident programs across the state. That's one of the biggest problems, is that there's not a lack of programming. There's a lack of people like Colby House that connect up the dots. The city has gotten better with that in creating welcoming centers in the city of Chicago, but downstate we don't have any of that. And so somebody gets out of prison, and I always say the programming is akin to being treated by 10 doctors in 10 different hospitals who don't talk to one another, and when you call them, they keep you on hold for an hour and then hang up. And it creates tremendous frustration. And again, the frustration leads to anger, and people go back. And we haven't seen very much of a response to that in the state. I think that as a result of that, we're stepping up in the Archdiocese. The Episcopalians are stepping up through St. Leonard's. We're seeing dialogue now with ELCA, the Lutherans, and that gap is beginning to close. Where the state are beginning to get filled, rather, where the state isn't filling it, but it's still going to be years and years away.
Yeah, and that's where I think the state does have its role in funding and that kind of thing, but I think the most effective ambassadors, if you will, the people doing the field, are probably in the religious communities, like you said. I forgot about the St. Leonard's House, on the west side there.
They do tremendous work.
Yeah.
Great work.
Any particular legislation pending that we should know about, or
the isolation, the bill. There's a couple of bills.
Kevin
out
Ockel
there.
has, I believe, right? Representative Ockel, I think, has one of those.
Has one, and then Robert Peters in the Senate has the Nelson Mandela Act, which is somewhat the same. And I was lucky enough to write the preamble for that for Robert. Are the two big ones that are out there right now. Those seem to be the only two that are moving. And I think that they're important. They were part of a dialogue that started last year with a bill that I was working on in regards to lewd behavior in prisons, to be able to treat lewd behavior in prisons for what it is, a mental health issue, rather than something that's going to be criminalized. Because if you're engaging in that kind of behavior in prison, you're there. Further criminalization of it is probably not going to be deterrent.
You're right.
So let's get it where it is. And in connection with that, the criminal justice advocacy community said, but you don't understand the underlying social determinant of this. It's the fact that people are getting held in their cells for too long, and it's creating this kind of psychological disorder in people. We've got to start getting people out of their cells, out of that little confined space for the 24/7 or whatever they're in. So I think those are two really important things. We got to start remembering. I mean, I think this is. I was talking to a group at UIC Law School earlier in the week. We can legislate all of these things, but we can't. And you know this. You can't legislate people's behavior. You can't legislate their mindset. We can't, unfortunately. When you and I are emperor, we're going to do that. But I mean, this is, again, going back to what I started with, the idea of taking volunteers and changing their minds and having them go off into the community. That's going to do more good for us in the long run, because we've got to get people starting to understand that 90% of people who are in prison are going to leave eventually and go somewhere. And if we continue this punitive mindset of permanent punishments, you're never going to be redeemed, you're never going to be reconciled, we're going to continue to have problems.
Exactly, when they get out.
When they get out, we need to start figuring out ways to change that vengeful nature. If you did something wrong, you never get to get past this, so that we have healthy people. Once those people are healthy, our communities are going to be healthy. The communities that they live in are going to be healthy. The statistic, I'll throw one more statistic at you. The statistic that always gets me is the fact that most people coming out of prison in Illinois go to one of 7 Chicago neighborhoods. I think I've told you this one before. And those neighborhoods constitute 10% of the city's population. There's 7 of 77, 10% of the city's population, 25% of its violent crimes, 32% of its homicides.
There you go. Right.
Until we start making it healthy for those people coming back to those communities aren't going to be healthy, and the city and the state aren't going to be healthy.
This is a fascinating area, not only in terms of what the church does in terms of its moral obligation to minister to people in the jails, to make sure that they know they have dignity as humans, but also what you're talking about, the public policy repercussions of doing this right are so important for society at large. And thank you for what you do. It's a great, Colby House is a great gem, unfortunately, that doesn't get much attention, but it should get a little bit more. It should get a lot more.
Well, thank you.
Mark, thanks for coming in.
Thanks, Bob.
This is Bob Gilligan of the Catholic Conference. Don't go away. We'll be right back. We're going to plug an event coming up in Springfield on April 17th. One of our CCI staff members, Janet Malafa, will be with us. Don't go away.
Ancestry and genealogy are more important every day. People all over the world are wanting to learn more about their family heritage for personal and for health reasons. At Catholic Charities, we are hearing from adults who lived for a brief time at St. Vincent's Orphanage, the wonderful life-affirming agency that operated out of our headquarters for 91 years, serving thousands of women, children, and families until it closed in 1972. Our post-adoption services help adults who want to learn more about their experience at St. Vincent's. Our compassionate staff members provide whatever family background information they can offer, along with support and reunion services. To learn more, call 312-655-7093. That's 312-655-7093. The spirit of St. Vincent's lives on in the inspiring stories that continue to emerge today.
Thanks for coming back. I think that's my new line here for the final 5 minutes and 35 seconds of our program. Our gratitude goes to Mark McCombs for coming in from Colby House, and of course, Dr. Kevin Gardner, who was with talking about the assisted suicides issue. So now let's switch gears. We're going to do a quick promo. The promotion is for the March for Life, and here to tell us about some of the details is one of the premier staff members at the Catholic Conference of Illinois, Jeanette Malafa. I just left yesterday at about 11 o'clock last night. Jeanette, it's been a long time. Thanks for coming on and talking a little bit about the March for Life. So tell us kind of the what's going on April 17th. Is that the right date? Am I close?
Yes.
Cool.
Good morning, Bob.
Good morning.
Wednesday, April 17th, the main events are at noon at the State House, and then at 1 o'clock, the March for Life happens. So people will gather on the east side of the Capitol building. There's a long list of speakers, including Bishop Paprocki from the Diocese of Springfield, Illinois, and also the minority leader in the House, Tony McCombie. And then there's a ton of auxiliary events. I'll go through a couple of them right now. At 10 a.m. At UIS Sangamon Auditorium, there is a Catholic Mass. I do know you have to register in advance. There is a waiting list, but they're making sure that the spots that people took are actually going to be used. So they're going through the waiting list. So if you'd like to attend that, put your name on the waiting list. Also at 10 a.m., there's a Matins prayer service at Trinity Lutheran. That is on the northeast corner across from the state capitol. Also, there's Lenten cookies and coffees at St. Anthony the Great Orthodox Christian Church on Glenwood Avenue in Springfield. That's by Blessed Sacrament, if any of you know where that church is. There's also a Lenten meal at the Greek Orthodox Church. And then after the march at the cathedral, which is only a few blocks away, Cathedral of the Immaculate Conception, there's adoration of the Blessed Sacrament from 1 to 5, and there's confessions from 1:30 to 5. If you do not make the Mass at 10 o'clock, at Sangamon Auditorium, there's another Mass you could attend at Cathedral at 5:15. So those are the ancillary events that go along with the big event, which is at 12 o'clock, speakers at the Capitol, and then 1 o'clock, the walk around State House. Wear comfy shoes. Also, I want to give the website for people just in case they want to get on for more details. It's marchforlife.org/Illinois. If you just get to the marchforlife.org, there's also a pull down menu and you can find your state, which is obviously Illinois. Bring your own signs, or there will be signs there. Creative signs get more attention than everyone having the same signs. And there's a link on the website. If you want to come and you don't have transportation, there is a list of buses that are still accepting passengers. So that website has a ton of information.
That's great. And I think for people who are hearing this or listening to this for the first time, just to remind you that, years ago, this is the second year or third year that the March for Life has been in Springfield. This is the same event people may recognize that we used to do up here in Chicago. And it used to be around the anniversary of Roe v. Wade on January 22nd or around that weekend. And because times change, things change, the thinking was that we should move that out of Chicago and bring it to the state capitol where the decisions are made about life. So Jeanette, we got about a minute to go, about 45 seconds. I know they're going to be talking about some of the issues pending in Springfield. What are maybe one or two of the major issues that'll be discussed?
Well, always, I believe most of the speakers will be speaking on abortion bills. But there's also going to be a speaker, Dr. Mary Keene, who is the executive director of the Catholic Medical Society, and she will be speaking on the newest right to life issue, which will be assisted suicide, which I know you just spoke about for 30 minutes. So yes, we're seeing more issues pop into the space of life.
Yeah, it's great. It's a really heartwarming event. The Mass is wonderful. It's really uplifting. That auditorium will be packed. You'll have a nice feeling leaving there. You'll feel like you're with fellow people who are really committed to trying to advocate for life at all stages, from conception to natural death. And after that, you can go to the rally. You'll hear some motivating speakers. And I think you mentioned that the minority leader, Tony McCombie, will be one of them. It'll be nice to see her there, along with some of the other speakers. And then if people want to, they can have the chance to go to the Capitol and do a little bit of talking to their state rep and or state senator. So I think it's going to be a great event. I think that people encourage them to come on April 17th, which is Wednesday, and there's transportation down there as well.
Correct. Great. And try to look up your rep and state senator beforehand so you'll know if you can actually get into their office and see them. I think that's a good thing to know for people.
Jeanette, thanks for taking some time.
Don't forget adoration and confession at Cathedral after.
Thanks for taking some time. Great 5-minute overview of the March for Life. This is Bob Gilligan of the Catholic Conference of Illinois, and thank you for watching the program today and listening. I'll be back next month with more exciting topics to talk about that are pending at the Capitol or in D.C. Have a good day.
Join us every Monday through Friday at this time for Catholic Chicago. You can stream our programs live or listen to past programs by visiting our website, archchicago.org, and clicking on Radio TV. And please connect with Catholic Chicago on social media.